That's your Gap hoodie, is that right? That's you who you're shooting at?
Young Dolph's murder rocked Memphis, and from the very start, all eyes were on Yo Gotti.
Gotti, say your prayers. You better say your prayers.
You know they coming, don't you?
Now a leaked recording has surfaced, and fans are convinced Gotti slipped up and low-key admitted to putting the hit in motion.
They post us and go hang them up.
Gotti might be getting lined up for Dolph's death. Let me break it down. The smoking gun, what really went down. See, when young Dolph got gunned down on November 17th, 2021, outside that cookie shop in Memphis, everybody knew this wasn't just a random shooting. This was execution-style murder. 22 shots fired through the window while Dolph was unarmed, just trying to buy some cookies for a charity event.
The Memphis police chief is asking everyone to stay home tonight after rapper Young Dolph is gunned down and killed at a South Memphis cookie shop.
But here's where it gets real spicy and why y'all need to pay attention. The streets always knew there was more to this story, but nobody could prove it. Fast forward to 2024, and we got Cornelius Smith on that witness stand, spilling tea hotter than Memphis barbecue sauce. This man didn't just confess to pulling the trigger. He laid out the entire operation like he was reading from a script that somebody else wrote.
Who had a hit on whose head?
King Juke had a hit on Dolph head or whatnot.
How much money was it supposed to be?
100,000 on Dolph head.
Now, Smith wasn't just talking to hear himself speak. This brother testified that there was a $100,000 bounty on young Dolph's head, and that bounty came from none other than Big Juke, Yo Gotti's own blood brother. But here's the kicker that's got the streets buzzing and federal investigators taking notes. Smith revealed that CMG, which is Yo Gotti's label, paid $50,000 for his lawyer after he got arrested. Now you tell me, why would a record label be paying legal fees for someone who just murdered their rival unless they had skin in the game? The testimony gets even wilder when you realize what Smith was really saying. He didn't just admit to the murder. He broke down the entire payment structure like he was explaining a drug deal to an undercover cop. The deal was supposed to be $40,000 each for the shooters and $20,000 for Hernandez Govan, who allegedly set the whole thing up. But check this, Smith only got $800 before he got locked up.
Now we've been paid about $800.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Is there any other payment coming?
All the payments stopped then.
All the payments stopped.
Everything stopped.
Is there any time that you or your girlfriend or anybody received a large payment?
Nah.
That's when CMG stepped in with that lawyer money, acting like they were doing him a favor when really they were covering their own tracks and keeping him quiet. But let's talk about what makes this even more suspicious and why federal prosecutors are probably salivating over this case. Justin Johnson, the other shooter who got convicted and sentenced to life, wasn't just some random street dude looking for a quick come-up. He was an aspiring CMG artist. This man was trying to get signed to Yo Gotti's label, and according to the prosecution's narrative, Big Juke allegedly made it crystal clear that killing young Dolph was the price of admission to CMG.
I guess trying to get him a deal.
Okay. Do you know who he was trying to get him a deal with?
Oh, Big Juke and him, got in him.
All right. You said Big Juke, is that correct?
Yeah.
You ever heard of the music label CMG?
Yeah.
Is that Big Juke's?
Yeah, Big Juke and him.
And his brother, right?
Yeah.
Think about that for a minute. We're not talking about some street beef that got out of hand. We're talking about a record label allegedly using murder as a business strategy, turning assassination into an audition process. That's the kind of criminal enterprise behavior that gets entire organizations indicted under RICO statutes. Now, I know what y'all thinking. Where's Yo Gotti in all this? Here's where the plot thickens like Mississippi mud on a rainy day. While Big Juke was supposedly orchestrating this whole operation, making promises and setting up hits, Yo Gotti was maintaining his distance, keeping his hands clean on paper, playing the role of the legitimate businessman who didn't know what his brother was doing in the streets. But the streets know better than to believe that the head of CMG, a man who built his entire career on being connected to Memphis street politics, didn't know what his own blood brother was planning, especially when it involved eliminating their biggest rival and most successful independent artist in the city. The optics alone should have been enough to make any smart businessman step in and shut it down. The prosecution painted a picture during that trial that was clearer than 4K video on a brand new iPhone. They showed how this murder was tied directly to the long-standing feud between CMG and Young Dolph's Paper Route empire. But more importantly, they demonstrated how business rivalries in the music industry can turn deadly when street politics get involved. This wasn't just about two rappers not liking each other's music. This was about territorial control, market share, and who gets to be the king of Memphis hip-hop. When you got an independent artist like Young Dolph making millions without needing a major label deal, proving that the traditional industry model model isn't necessary for success, that threatens the entire ecosystem that labels like CMG depend on. What makes this story even more compelling is the timeline and the pattern of violence that preceded Dolph's murder. Young Dolph had survived 2 previous assassination attempts, one in Charlotte, North Carolina in February 2017, where his SUV got hit with over 100 rounds, and another in Los Angeles in September 2017, where he actually got shot but survived. Each time, the finger-pointing went back to CMG associates, but nothing stuck in court. The third time, unfortunately, was the charm. The federal implications of all this are what's really got people shook and what's keeping Yo Gotti's lawyers working overtime. Music industry insider Wack 100 went on record warning Yo Gotti about potential RICO charges, suggesting that CMG could be classified as a criminal organization rather than just a record label. When you got federal authorities looking at your business like it's the Gambino crime family instead of an entertainment company, that's when you know the heat is turned all the way up. But here's what's really got the streets talking, and what might be the most damning evidence of all: the retaliation cycle that followed the murder. Big Jook himself got gunned down in January 2024, just months after these trial revelations started coming out. The streets see this as paper route empire getting their lick back, evening the score. And honestly, can you blame them? When someone orchestrates the murder of your leader, your brother, your meal ticket, the code of the street says there's gotta be consequences. The evidence that came out during the trial reads like a federal prosecutor's dream case. You got financial records showing suspicious payments, you got witness testimony detailing criminal conspiracies, you got patterns of violence, and you got a clear motive tied to business competition. The prosecution was able to demonstrate that this wasn't just a random street beef, it was a calculated business decision designed to eliminate competition and send a message to other independent artists in Memphis. The courtroom revelations also exposed just how deep the connections run between CMG and the actual shooters. This wasn't a situation where some random street dudes decided to take out young Dolph for clout or money. These were people directly connected to Yo Gotti's organization, people who saw their future success tied to CMG's approval. The Memphis Connection: blood money and music industry politics. Now let's dive deeper into how this whole Memphis situation really unfolded, because to understand why young Dolph had to die according to the prosecution's theory, you gotta understand the intricate politics of Memphis hip-hop and how money moves through the trap music industry like water through the Mississippi Delta. This ain't just about 2 rappers not liking each other's flow. This is about territory, respect, market control, and who gets to control the narrative coming out of one of the South's most influential and profitable music cities. Memphis hip-hop has always been different from other regional scenes, and if you don't understand that difference, you can't understand why this beef escalated to murder. It's grittier than Atlanta's commercial success, more connected to actual street life than New York's lyrical complexity. And when Memphis rappers talk that tough talk in their verses, they're usually really about that life. Yo Gotti built his entire career and reputation on songs like My City, where he rapped about having 100 clips, 100 guns, a hood full of killers. And according to the streets, this wasn't just braggadocious rap music. This was real life spilling into the recording booth. The beef between Yo Gotti and young Dolph officially started around 2014, but it wasn't just about musical differences or artistic competition. It began when Dolph publicly and emphatically refused to sign with Yo Gotti's CMG label, choosing instead to stay completely independent with his own paper route empire. In the music industry, that kind of public rejection is deeply personal, especially when you're talking about an artist from your own city, your own neighborhood, basically telling the world that he doesn't need your platform, your connections, or your money to be successful. But Dolph didn't just reject the offer quietly and move on with his career. He made it into content, turned it into motivation, and used it as fuel for some of his hardest tracks. He released songs like Play With Yo B***, directly targeting Yo Gotti and positioning himself as the real authentic voice of Memphis, the true king who didn't need corporate backing to maintain his crown. Don't play with me, Ho Gotti. You a hoe, man. You went from my biggest fan to my biggest hater, facts. Begging me to sign with you, but I had too much paper, facts. Still that same that used to front your big brother, facts. Found out he a too, now I call him your big sister. This was more than typical hip-hop diss tracks. This was Dolph essentially saying that the emperor had no clothes, that CMG's success was built on industry, politics rather than street credibility. The financial implications of this beef were absolutely massive, and that's something most people don't fully understand when they're just focusing on the artistic side of the rivalry. Young Dolph was making serious money independently. We're talking millions of dollars in revenue from touring, streaming, merchandise, and brand partnerships, and every single dollar he made independently was a dollar that CMG couldn't couldn't touch, couldn't tax, couldn't profit from. In an industry where major labels make most of their real money from artist development, touring percentages, and publishing rights, having a hugely successful independent artist in your own backyard basically thumbing his nose at your entire business model is a constant reminder that your way isn't the only path to success. When you really break down the economics of what young Dolph represented, it becomes clear why he was such a threat to the traditional label system. He was proving that artists could maintain creative control, keep their publishing rights, build their own distribution networks, and still compete with major label artists on streaming platforms and concert venues. That's dangerous information for labels that depend on artists believing they need corporate backing to reach mainstream success. Now let's talk about Big Jook's role in all this, because understanding Anthony Big Jook Mims is absolutely crucial to understanding how this murder allegedly went from an idea to an execution. Big Jook wasn't just Yo Gotti's brother. He was a legitimate CMG executive with real decision-making power in the organization. When you're talking about major label politics and business decisions that could affect millions of dollars in revenue, having family members in executive positions means those business decisions get personal real quick, and personal decisions in the street-oriented hip-hop world can turn deadly. The prosecution's case during the trial painted Big Jook as the operational mastermind who put the hit in motion. But let's think about this situation logically for a minute. They claimed Big Jook offered $100,000 for Young Dolph's murder and specifically tied that payment to Justin Johnson's potential CMG record deal. That's not the kind of major financial decision that a label executive makes in isolation, especially when you're talking about eliminating someone who's basically become the face of independent Memphis hip-hop and a symbol of resistance to the major label system. What makes this even more intriguing and potentially damaging for CMG as an organization is how the money moved after the murder actually happened. Cornelia Smith testified under oath that CMG paid $50,000 for his legal representation after he got arrested for the murder. Now, record labels pay for legal representation all the time, but usually for their own signed artists, not for people who just murdered their biggest competition. That payment pattern suggests a level of organizational involvement that goes way beyond just family loyalty or coincidental assistance. The street politics of Memphis also play a huge role in understanding how this situation escalated from business rivalry to actual homicide. Memphis consistently has one of the highest murder rates in the entire country, and Yo Gotti has referenced this violent reality in multiple tracks like My City, where he raps about how every day somebody's killed in these streets, whether innocent or guilty. This isn't just social commentary or artistic expression. This is the actual environment where these artists develop their careers, learn their business practices, and form their understanding of how disputes get resolved when legal remedies aren't available or sufficient. But here's what's really wild about the Memphis connection and what makes this case so potentially explosive: the retaliation cycle that followed Young Dolph's murder and how it's continued to play out on the streets. Big Jook got killed in January 2024, and while nobody's been officially charged with his murder, the streets universally interpret this as payback from Dolph's people, evening the score in the most permanent way possible. This is exactly how street justice works in environments where the legal system is seen as inadequate or untrustworthy. You take someone's king, they take yours, and the cycle continues until everyone's dead or in prison. The timing of the murder also speaks to how calculated and strategic this whole operation allegedly was, according to the prosecution's theory. November 2021 was when Young Dolph was at the absolute height of his independent success, proving conclusively that artists didn't need major label backing to make serious money, build sustainable careers, and compete with corporate-backed artists in Memphis and beyond. His success was becoming a legitimate blueprint for other artists who might have previously considered signing with CMG out of necessity rather than preference. And that kind of influential example threatens the entire major label recruitment and development system. What's particularly disturbing about the Memphis connection is how it demonstrates the dangerous intersection of legitimate business operations and street-level violence. CMG is undeniably a real record label, with legitimate artists making legitimate money through legal channels. But according to the prosecution's case against the shooters, they were also allegedly using street-level violence and intimidation to eliminate business competition. That's exactly the kind of criminal enterprise behavior that gets organizations hit with federal RICO charges, transforming them from entertainment companies into criminal conspiracies in the eyes of the law. The cultural impact of this beef extended far beyond just the two primary artists involved, affecting the entire Memphis hip-hop ecosystem in ways that are still playing out today. When the city's two biggest, most successful, and most influential stars are in a life-or-death feud, it impacts how other artists move through the city, how they do business, how they choose their affiliations, and how they interact with both camps. You literally can't be neutral in Memphis when CMG and Paper Route Empire are at war. You have to pick a side, and that choice could determine whether you eat regularly or whether you you become a target yourself. As we move into the final section of this story, remember that what we've covered about the Memphis connection represents just the surface level of what federal investigators might be examining if they're really building a RICO case against CMG and associated individuals. The cultural, financial, and geographical factors that made this beef so deadly are the same factors that could make a federal case so comprehensive and devastating for everyone involved. The aftermath and ongoing federal investigations. Now we're getting to the part of the story that's still actively unfolding in courtrooms and federal buildings across the country, because young Dolph's murder trial was just the opening act of what could become a much larger legal drama, with implications reaching all the way to federal law enforcement agencies and potentially reshaping how the music industry handles business disputes. What we witnessed in that Memphis courtroom wasn't just justice for one murder, it was potentially a preview of how federal prosecutors might be building a comprehensive case that could take down an entire organizational structure and everyone connected to it. Let's start with what actually happened to the shooters and why their individual fates tell us everything we need to know about how seriously the legal system is taking this case. Justin Johnson got convicted on September 26, 2024, and received a life sentence without the possibility of parole for first-degree murder, conspiracy, and firearm possession. That's not just a harsh sentence.
Mr. Johnson, the jury having found you guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, and convicted felon in possession of a firearm. As the 13th juror, I affirm this verdict. As to the first-degree murder, I sentence you to life in prison.
That's the kind of punishment that sends a clear message to the entire hip-hop industry that the days of settling business disputes with violence are officially over, at least as far as the courts are concerned. But Justin Johnson's conviction and life sentence was just the tip of what appears to be a much larger iceberg. Cornelius Smith, who actually testified against Johnson and admitted under oath to being one of the shooters, is still waiting for his own sentencing hearing.
I shot through the glass, so I wasn't close up on him. I was shooting through the glass. I saw him standing by the window. I just got out and started shooting.
The fact that Smith's cooperation with prosecutors earned him a delay in sentencing tells us that there are still bigger fish that law enforcement is trying to catch, because you don't give a cooperating witness that kind of consideration unless they're actively helping you build cases against more important targets. Then we got Hernandez Govan, who's been identified by prosecutors as the alleged mastermind behind the entire operation. Govan's case is particularly interesting because he rejected a plea deal offer in July 2025, and his trial got postponed until August 18, 2025. When someone rejects a plea deal in a high-profile murder case, that usually means one of two things. Either they genuinely think they can beat the charges at trial, or they're more afraid of retaliation from the streets than they are of spending the rest of their life in federal prison. What makes Govan's case particularly significant for understanding the broader implications is his alleged direct connections to Big Jook and the wider CMG organizational structure. Prosecutors have painted him as the crucial middleman who facilitated the hit between Big Jook's alleged orders and the actual shooters who carried out the murder. If they can prove that connection definitively in court, it establishes a clear, traceable line from CMG's executive leadership directly to the murder itself, which is exactly the kind of organizational criminal liability that federal RICO prosecutions are designed to address. But here's where things get really spicy and potentially career-ending for everyone involved: the federal implications that industry insiders have been whispering about in private conversations for months. Music industry veteran and insider Whack 100 went on Clubhouse in October 2024 and essentially issued a public warning to Yo Gotti to say your prayers, suggesting that federal RICO charges were imminent that would reclassify CMG from an entertainment company into a criminal organization. Now, RICO charges are absolutely no joke, and anyone in the music industry who's been paying attention to federal prosecutions over the past few years should understand exactly how devastating they can be. That's the same legal framework they use to systematically dismantle traditional organized crime families. And when federal prosecutors start examining your business operations through that particular lens, they're not just looking at individual crimes. They're looking for patterns of criminal activity that demonstrate an ongoing criminal enterprise using legitimate business operations as a front. The speculation among industry insiders is that federal investigators might be connecting young Dolph's murder to the previous assassination attempts in 2017, creating a documented pattern of violence and intimidation that could easily support comprehensive RICO charges. When you can demonstrate a pattern of using violence to to eliminate business competition over multiple years. That's exactly the kind of systematic criminal behavior that RICO statutes were designed to prosecute. What makes the federal angle even more credible and potentially devastating is how financial transactions moved after the murder occurred. That $50,000 that CMG allegedly paid for Cornelia Smith's legal representation isn't just potential witness tampering. It could be direct evidence of a criminal conspiracy to obstruct justice and cover up organizational involvement in the murder. When a supposedly legitimate business is paying legal fees for someone who murdered their competition, that pattern of financial behavior starts looking less like coincidental assistance and more like systematic criminal enterprise activity. The retaliation aspect of this story is what's really got federal law enforcement agencies concerned and what's keeping this case in the headlines month after month. Big Juke's murder in January 2024 was clearly and directly connected to Young Dolph's murder, creating an ongoing cycle of violence that shows this beef is far from resolved. Federal investigators absolutely hate ongoing violence because it means more bodies are going to drop, and each new murder gives them additional evidence and justification to build even more comprehensive cases. What's particularly concerning for anyone connected to CMG or the broader Memphis hip-hop scene is how thorough and far-reaching federal investigations typically become once they get started. Federal agencies don't just look at the immediate crime that triggered their interest. They go back years, sometimes decades, examining financial records, communication patterns, travel records, and building cases that can take down entire organizations and everyone peripherally connected to them. If they're really building a RICO case against CMG, they're probably examining everything from potential money laundering to witness intimidation to continuing criminal enterprise charges that could result in life sentences for multiple people. The ongoing trials and legal proceedings also mean that significantly more incriminating information is going to come out over the next several months. Smith's eventual sentencing hearing could reveal additional details about CMG's alleged organizational involvement, and Govan's trial in August 2025 might expose even more connections and financial arrangements. Each court proceeding represents another opportunity for prosecutors to present evidence that could implicate additional people in the alleged conspiracy and expand the scope of potential federal charges. The ultimate question that remains unanswered is whether the music industry will learn meaningful lessons from this tragedy and implement systemic changes to prevent similar violence, or whether we're going to continue seeing more bodies drop as the financial stakes continue getting higher and the temptation to handle business disputes through violence remains strong. With streaming revenues making hip-hop more profitable than ever before, and with street credibility still being a major factor in determining artist success and marketability, the underlying incentives that allegedly made Young Dolph's murder seem like a viable business strategy haven't fundamentally changed. The streets are watching every move, the federal agents are investigating every connection, and this story is still being written in real time. Remember, in this game, the stakes are real, the consequences are permanent, and the price of success might be higher than anyone wants to pay. And with that, we've come to the end of this deep dive. For more juicy content like this, smash that subscribe button, hit the bell for notifications, and check out the cards showing on your screen for more videos. Don't forget to comment your thoughts below.